this week. We just got a new report from the Brookings Institution, which is a well-known nonprofit. And in this report, they take a data-driven approach to analyzing the potential impact of generative AI on the American workforce. And some of these findings are worth paying a little bit of attention to because the study highlights that generative AI could significantly disrupt a wide range of jobs, with over 30% of workers potentially seeing at least half of their tasks affected by AI. 85% of workers could see at least 10% of their work tasks impacted. And to assess this, Brookings, quote, utilized estimates shared by OpenAI relating the predicted ChatGPT-4 exposure level of thousands of the tasks that make up the hundreds of occupations defined by the Department of Labor's ONET database. Now, unlike previous waves of automation that impacted routine blue-collar work, generative AI, they say, is poised to affect cognitive and non-routine tasks, which means it is getting into middle and higher paid professions. They highlight fields such as STEM, business, finance, law, office administration. All of these are the most exposed to potential generative AI disruption. And they also make the point that while there are opportunities and risks for workers with generative AI, society is currently underprepared to address these challenges. Now, Paul, I don't think we directly know anyone at Brookings Institution, but this is sounding very familiar. So a note on the methodology here. Brookings used estimates shared by OpenAI relating the predicted exposure level of thousands of the tasks that make up occupations using the ONET database. That sounds a lot like the methodology that you use to create in part Jobs GPT and Campaigns GPT. Like, how seriously are you taking this study? Can you talk a little bit about this methodology, why it might make sense?
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. I mean, this is what is needed. So this is what I've been, kind of pleading for is more high-level involvement from institutions that can move the needle, have the ears of key government leaders and industry leaders. So I am very happy to see this effort. I like the questions they're asking. So, the report starts off with how do we ensure workers can proactively shape generative AI's design and deployment? What will it take to make sure worker benefits meaningfully from the gains? And what guardrails are needed for workers to avoid harms as much as possible? I like that they're taking a multi-year approach. They said this is just a start of the initiative. Brookings Metro has embarked on a new multi-year effort focused on raising awareness and shaping societal responses. Wonderful. They said they're drawing on insights from a workshop where they convened 30 experts from policy, business innovation, investment, labor, academic, think tank research, civil society, and philanthropy. Brilliant. More of this. Like, this is all phenomenal. What they did, from best I can tell, is they actually took the GPTs paper from August 2023, which is where the exposure methodology originated from. So this is an OpenAI paper where Mike and I have talked about this on the show before. We talked about it in the Jobs GPT episode, I think it's 110, which is when GPT-4 came out. So GPT-4 comes out in March 2023. OpenAI, I think in partnership with Microsoft, or it might have been mostly OpenAI, created a research paper called GPTs are GPTs. Generative pre-trained transformers, the foundation of language models, are general purpose technologies, was the point that these AIs are capable of doing many cognitive tasks is kind of the premise of a general purpose technology. And so it seems like what Brookings has done is zoomed into that research. So this doesn't seem like new research on their part that's looking at 30% of all workers could see at least 50% of their occupation task. I think they just further analyzed OpenAI's data, which means the data is a year and a half old that they're referencing. So it's probably not even that relevant per se. But if that's what they did, which is what it seems to be, then I have the same, I don't know, concerns isn't even the right word. Like the same reason I built Jobs GPT and the exposure key that I developed, which goes beyond current and it looks at future capabilities of advanced reasoning and persuasion and digital action and computer vision, having agents in the world. So when we built Jobs GPT, the idea was to project future impact on jobs, to look at the exposure of the models we know that are coming. And so I think that there's a lot to build on with what Brookings is doing. If we can assist them in any way, like please, someone reach out. We're happy to provide any data or help wherever we can, because this is the kind of initiative I think we need more of. Is just these higher profile institutions really aggressively pursuing answers to very difficult questions. And I think at the end of the day, like if you go back to episode 105, Mike, you and I were talking about this, the Carl Schulman interview, one of the co-founders of OpenAI. The early people there, he did that 80,000 hours interview. And in that one, he talked about the economic impact. So we kind of went pretty deep into there. And I went back and I pulled the excerpt where I said, like, what Carl was talking about in that episode, and what I think Brookings is hopefully trying to get at here, is there is massive disruption coming. No one seems to be talking about it. Like, economists don't seem to be talking about it. Industry leaders don't seem to be talking about it. Government leaders don't seem to be talking about it, because they don't seem to really realize what's about to happen. And that even if we don't get to AGI and we just get smarter models that follow these scaling laws, that's sufficiently disruptive. And we don't have answers to what happens to jobs in all these different industries. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just really happy to see this. And I hope they really aggressively pursue this plan that they have. They talk about defining and supporting good employer practices, enhancing worker voice and power, and developing public policy solutions as sort of like their three main priority areas going forward. But they address that there's just so many unknowns and so many questions that need to be explored. And that's kind of where I'm at. Is like, I don't have the answers, but it sure looks, when you look out a year or two from now, like we're going to see some pretty significant disruption across a lot of different industries that no one is preparing for.
And kind of like you alluded to in the Schulman episode, you expressed, I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, like bafflement that more people aren't talking about this. And it made you kind of feel like when you were kind of very early to AI and you were like, I can see where the impact is going to be. I'm surprised more people aren't talking about it, because a thing that they mention in here is that they said this data does not even attempt to project future capability enhancements from next generation AI models likely to be released. So they're saying, like, these are the numbers we're citing to you of exposure of just today.
Right.
And we've talked about we're on the cusp of GPT-5 already.
Right. And that's, I get why they wouldn't do that yet, but I also don't see why you couldn't. Like, I mean, that's, I built the jobs GPT exposure key by just studying the space and looking at what all these research labs are telling us. It's pretty obvious what they're all working on. Like, you don't have to search really that hard to reasonably project what the next versions of these models are going to be able to do. And so why can't we model that to specific industries? And that's what needs to happen, is take the exposure key I've created, like go to smarterx.ai and go to the jobs GPT page, and like the exposure keys right there. Think about your industry. If you're an accountant, customer service, lawyer, doctor, I don't care what you are, entrepreneur, take that exposure key and think about your own career paths and industries. Like, this isn't that hard to do, but for whatever reason, we haven't had economists and institutions like Brookings do it yet at scale. And that's what has to happen, is like, we can only think kind of horizontally, and we think obviously about marketers through our Marketing Institute brand. But like, I spent Saturday doing a talk on AI and entrepreneurship in K through 12 education. And so for that afternoon, my brain is locked into like, what does this mean to educators? How do we prepare students at, my daughter's in 7th grade. So I was actually talking at like this morning, I was advising the 7th grade entrepreneurship initiative at the school. And so like, sometimes I'll zero into a specific vertical, but most of the time we're just zoomed out, and you and I, Mike, are talking like macro, and then hoping people will take that inspiration and go run into their domain. And that's where I think this needs to go, and Brookings isn't going to answer all that either. So if you're a listener to this podcast, like, take this knowledge and you go figure out what it means to your industry, your business over the next 1 to 2 years, because nobody else is doing it right now.
So just very briefly, it definitely touches on, in our last episode when we talked about one of the main topics was Dario Amadei's AI manifesto, how AI would impact work and society. And you kind of ended with this really interesting call to action. I thought we were like, look, we don't have the funding to do this massive, whatever research project or deep study, but someone like the government or Google or Microsoft, somebody needs to make this their thing and do deep studies about the future of the economy, you had said. And
Yeah.
we noted that we kind of have listeners of some of these companies. I just wanted to push like a little further as we wrap this up. Like, if you did have the funding or partners with the kind of funding it might take to actually take this seriously, like, would you both go broad and deep like you just described? Like, what would be kind of that next big step that needs to happen?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you and I talk so much about, even when I'm thinking about our own business model and how much, we try and tackle,
Yeah.
we always come back to empowering other people. Like, I think that more than anything, what I have focused our energy on is distribution of knowledge and information and tools that empower other people to go figure it out in their own domain, because this stuff's going to move too fast for one council or one, government initiative to achieve everything. And so I think by, distributing the knowledge into people who can then take it and apply it to their domain,
Yeah.
that's critical. But I do believe that there needs to be like an Apollo level mission on
Mm.
literacy and reskilling and upskilling workforce, not just on the building of the technology. And it seems to me like most of the focus at the big frontier model companies and at the government level is all about like, how do we build the smarter technology and maintain a competitive advantage over other countries, not what does this actually mean to our society and our workforce and our educational systems, and how do we, in a very quick time period, prepare for that. And I think, I don't know if I'm going to use that analogy on the last episode, but for better or for worse, the pandemic is the closest thing we have to how quickly we can mobilize change
Mm.
in business and society and educational systems. And I'm not saying we need like a 30-day plan, but it sure wouldn't hurt to have like a next 12-month plan from somewhere on high that's pushing for dramatic action. Again, I don't know exactly what the change looks like, but this isn't a 5 to 10 year play. Like, if
Yeah.
Dario and Demis and Sam and all these other people are right, we don't have 5 to 10 years. Like, we got 2 to 5, maybe, before like just completely disruption and transformation. So yeah, if you're in a position of authority or if you're in a position of power at one of these bigger entities, nonprofit, government, frontier model company, we got to do something way faster on the societal, educational, workforce side of things.